Welcome to APCUG's Wednesday workshop. We get together in the middle of the week to learn more about technology. Over the last number of months, we've had discussions about the future or people's future with Windows 10, Windows 11, and we've been making presentations about alternatives to Windows 11 or even Microsoft. Today, we've got a very excellent presentation where we've had somebody who was a Windows user, has done an in-depth recording presentation on his travels in his conversion from Windows to Linux. So we've asked John Krout, who's been with us before, who took this journey, to share with us ups, downs, whatever, on his journey of moving to Linux. John's a retired software engineer who helped create requirements, design, develop, and improve computer systems for the federal government agencies in the Washington, D.C. region for over the last 3 decades. He's a PADASIS, the Potomac Area Technology and Computer Society member, where he gives many presentations and writes articles for their newsletter and for APCU's Push, and many workshop presentations for us. Now he also writes about smartphones, tablets, digital cameras, electrical vehicles, EVs, and the plug-in hybrid electrical vehicles, which are PHEVs, for those people that like anachronisms. But today he's here to share with us his journey about moving to Linux. So John, turn things over to you.
All right, John, thank you for that introduction. John and I share a number of things in our backgrounds, aside from our first names. One of them is a reasonable speaking voice, and you could hear his was a bit under the weather today, and I'm afraid mine is too. But I've got lots of caffeine, lots of water, lots of menthol lozenges, and I'm hoping I can get through this for you without too much interruption. Let's see here. All right, I'll take a moment to share the presentation. First thing you're going to see is a yellow screen. Some of you will be very familiar with this already. And I'm going to hide some things that are blocking that screen, at least on my computer. There we go. Okay. Just a reminder, if you do want to save slides from my presentation or any presentation, or even just capture an error message on your computer, you can do that easily with a keystroke. These keystrokes allow you to save an image of your screen. So for Windows, you can see, first of all, it is hold down the Windows key and then tap print screen. And where does the image go? It goes into a subfolder of pictures called screenshots. We've got the same information for Macintosh, Android, and iOS. Also, in my presentation, when you see a check mark in the lower right corner, like you see here, that means I have completed displaying the slide, and I will try to remember to pause for 5 seconds so that if you want to capture it, you can do that. Okay, so let's go on. This is called Test Driving Linux. It's for people who want to get their toes wet without necessarily making a permanent change. But there's a second reason why you might want to know this information, and that is for recovery of your information on your computer when it will no longer boot Windows. And I'll explain exactly what I'm talking about as we go. One of the things that I found after having used Windows at home for about 26 years is that you can find Linux technology that will give you an experience very similar to Windows. It won't run Windows applications, but it'll let you do things like use familiar Windows keystrokes to copy, to paste. and so forth. And that's one of the reasons I want to introduce you to what's called the Cinnamon Desktop, which is available with Linux Mint and other distros of Linux. Originally, Microsoft announced the end of its support for Windows 10 for this year on October 14th. Oddly enough, apparently within the last week or so before that, there were some government factors that encouraged them to essentially give up that deadline. And we'll talk about that. That actually came to light during a prior Wednesday workshop for this organization. I'm going to show you how to make a test drive happen. And basically, it involves preparing a USB drive that has Linux installed on it in a bootable form. It's very easy to do. There's one mistake I made. I'm going to show you my mistake and why you should avoid it. Make your computer ready to start Linux when it's plugged in on a USB drive. I'll show you how to do that for the 2 Windows 10 computers that I have. And I'm going to show you also how to download the tool that we use for creating that USB drive with Linux installed on it. But let's talk about why it's worth testing. I have run into this problem myself during the 26 years we've had Windows in my home. The Windows operating system simply fails to start from the hard drive or the solid state drive. And before I started storing my personal files on my network attached storage instead of my documents, there were always files left in my documents or pictures or music. And Linux, as it turns out, with an important caveat, can, when booted from a USB drive, recover that information from your C drive. And so that's a valuable purpose, even if you don't want to use Linux on a permanent basis. The caveat is that the recovery technique assumes that the drive C file allocation table, also known as FAT, remains readable. If that table has been corrupted, there is little chance that you can recover that information with a Linux distro plugged in on a USB drive and booted from that drive. There is an app in Linux, just like Windows File Explorer, called Files. And it will display not only the drive C volume name in its list of accessible drives, but will also, assuming that the FAT table is readable, allow you to access and copy every file that you have on drive C. And that allows you to copy it to, say, another USB drive so that you can carry it to a different Windows computer if that is your need. There's also a web browser included in Linux Mint and some other distros of Linux. It's Firefox. And you can use that web browser to copy files to from your C drive to a Google Drive if you have a Google account. I have since found a way to link those Google Drives directly to the Files app, but that'll be the subject of a separate article or presentation because it's fairly complicated. So Linux Mint is not, how should I say it? Not a minor player in the history of Linux. It's a major Linux brand. And one of the interesting things about Linux is that it allows you to use several different desktops, meaning a presentation system that you can connect in, which is actually built in when you download it. Linux Mint allows you to download not only the Cinnamon desktop, but a couple of others. But I suggest if your experience is primarily with Windows, that you'll probably be more comfortable using the Cinnamon desktop for several reasons. And let's see, is it going? Yep, it did advance. Okay. A main menu, which is accessible by a tap of the Windows key on your keyboard or a click on the Linux Mint logo, which is in the same lower left corner where you previously learned to find the Windows logo. But it's there for the same reason. You can click on that and it brings up the main menu. There are popular apps, LibreOffice productivity apps, which I use a lot, Firefox web browser, which I just mentioned, the Thunderbird email client, and many others. I use, for instance, VLC Media Player and Audacity, the sound editor. I use those quite frequently in the work I do, both for my user group and for my own purposes. So there's a lot of things that if you are familiar with them on Windows, you'll find almost exactly the same behavior in the Linux versions of those apps. One of the differences with LibreOffice is you won't necessarily find all of the fonts that you want to use. And that is another subject that I will cover in a separate article or presentation, because I found out how to install a great variety of fonts. And Zoom. Zoom works on half a dozen of the major Linux distros, including Ubuntu and Linux Mint. Also Fedora and trying to remember the list. I think there's 7 or 8. I mentioned this previously. There are keystroke combos that work in Windows, also work with the Cinnamon desktop. Control S for save, Control C for copy, Control X for cut, Control V for paste. They work not only for text inside, say, a LibreOffice Writer document, but also for copying files or deleting files or moving files using the Files app. So it's just as versatile as in Windows. Those keystrokes will serve you well with the Cinnamon desktop. Oh, went a bit too far. Let's see here. There we go. In addition, cut, copy, and paste are also available by the right-click context menus in Linux Mint. Just like when you right-click in Windows, those generally show up in the context menu. All right. Microsoft planned to end Windows 10 support on October 15th, but they didn't. Or at least that was the deadline for signing up for the extended support plan called the ESU. But the European Union decided to put some pressure on Microsoft because they felt that wasn't enough lead time for the European Union citizens who used Windows 10. And they leaned so hard on Microsoft that Microsoft not only complied with that for European users, but they also, although quietly, applied that policy to US users as well. Not only did they extend the deadline, but they also eliminated the $30 filing fee for signing up for the ESU. So that's given you a slight extension of life for Windows 10. They're now specifying a drop dead date of October 14th in 2026. However, as I understand it, you do have to sign up for the ESU to get Windows 10 updates and Windows Defender virus signature updates. That may not be correct. I've heard other people say different things. So the best thing to do is inquire with Microsoft about that. Their website will probably answer that. Now, let's assume that you still have Windows 10. What are your options once we get to that drop dead date in October 2026? Although it won't help you with Windows 10 bug fixes and vulnerability fixes, you could subscribe to another antivirus product. That costs some money sometimes. Not all of them. There are a few that have a basic version that are free, but in general, you're going to have to spend some money. You could buy a Windows 11 computer. If eligible for installing Windows 11, you could do that. I have a couple of reasons why one of the two Windows computers I had was bought new in 2015, and it was not eligible. The more recent one, which was bought in 2021, is. If you have any interest in Linux, today you will find out how to test drive it, and that involves installing it on a USB drive and then setting up your Windows 10 computer to allow it to boot from that USB drive. And you're going to see both in this presentation. And you can decide later if you really want to replace Windows with Linux. One of the things I can say is that as far as I can tell, the major distros do not declare a drop dead date for moving up to a later version. And even if Linux Mint goes completely belly up and disappears from this planet, there are other distros that will allow you to continue with minimal difference in the way you interact with your computer. One of those is Ubuntu. All right. So there's two basic prep steps, and I've mentioned them already for doing a test drive. One is you've got to download some things, two pieces. One is the Linux Mint ISO file. And that term, ISO, some of you know what that stands for. It's the International Standards Organization. And we call it an ISO file because it is a file type that's defined by the International Standards Organization to contain a complete image of something. And that's typically what's used for downloading a distro of a Linux operating system. And it's a big download, 2.8 gigabytes. So I hope you have a nice high-speed internet service wherever you're doing it. The second thing you have to download is actually in a very modest size. It's called the Rufus application for Windows. And that is what we use to create a USB drive that contains the Linux Mint operating system in bootable form. So we're going to look at how to use Linux Mint, how to use Rufus to create that USB drive. And also I mentioned we have to modify the settings on your computer so that it will boot from that USB drive. One of the things you need to know about the way that Rufus works is that when you tell it to install Linux Mint on a flash drive, on a hard drive, or a solid state drive, it will completely overwrite every file on that drive. Do not count on anything surviving. We're going to see two examples of how to prepare your Windows computer to enable startup from an external USB drive. And at the end of this presentation, you'll see a link for downloading that Linux Mint ISO file with Cinnamon included, and also how to download Rufus. Rufus doesn't even require any installation. It is an exe file that will run immediately whenever you start it. You don't have to install it first. I mentioned my two Windows 10 computers. They're both laptops. I bought a Toshiba laptop, which was purchased new in 2015. And it has 12 gigabytes of RAM and an Intel i7 64-bit CPU. That laptop is not eligible to upgrade to a Windows 11. I also have a 4-year-old HP laptop with 8 gigabytes of RAM. I purchased that new, and it also had a AMD Ryzen 64-bit CPU. About a year ago, I upgraded that to 32 gigs of RAM. And that one is eligible to upgrade to Windows 11. I am unlikely to do that. I have some significant disagreements with Windows 11 forcing the Copilot application on us as if it were built into the operating system. They made that claim about Internet Explorer many years ago and were proven wrong in court. And I suspect that fate is going to land them once again on the wrong end if anybody ever sues over whether or not Copilot can be removed or not. Both of these machines ran Linux Mint with the Cinnamon desktop from the first flash drive I prepared, which was a 32 gigabyte Samsung flash drive that I had on hand. Later, I bought a 128 gigabyte Micro Center flash drive that cost $9. Fairly painless purchase, to be honest. And that gave me a tremendous amount of room for installing additional applications for Linux Mint, and also for installing pictures I could use as backgrounds on my Linux Mint. We're going to see examples of that. But we're going to start with installing Linux Mint with Cinnamon on a USB drive using Rufus. This assumes that you have downloaded Linux Mint with Cinnamon in an ISO file on your Windows computer. This is what the Rufus looks like when you run it on your Windows computer. You should attach an external USB drive. You don't have to attach it immediately when you start or before you start Rufus, but you do those kind of at the same time. Be aware, as I mentioned before, Rufus will completely erase and reformat that USB drive. Now, when it starts, if you have already attached the USB external drive, it will be identified at the top under the heading Device. I have circled that on the screen so you know where it is in the window. But I've also blown it up here so it's easier to read. There's that word device, and the field below it will list your USB drive. If you happen to have more than one plugged into that computer, then it will actually have a drop-down list, and you can choose which one that you want to install Linux Mint on. Click the select button. I circled that here on the screen also. Rufus opens a standard open file dialog box. Now, the purpose here is to identify the ISO file that you have downloaded. Use that dialog box to navigate to and select the downloaded Linux Mint ISO file. When you click the dialog box open button, the dialog box closes and the name of the file appears directly to the left of the select button. Now, step 3. This is the one I got wrong, folks. It displays this new field, which I circled for you. It's called a persistence partition size. Clear as mud, right? Well, I'm going to clear up that confusion. Click and drag the blue bar that you see inside the field all the way to the left, drag it to the right. Now I've blown it up so that you can see it more readily. And you can see to the right, there's a field that says 0, no persistence. I should have read that. I didn't. The partition size you want to set appears in the field to the right and it will change as you drag the blue bar to the right with your mouse. I suggest using a partition size of no less than 50% of the USB drive capacity. If you're using something larger than 32, I'd recommend using 2/3 or 3/4 for the partition size. So what is a persistence partition? Initially, I ignored the field, and this is how I found out what it does. The size was set to 0. I created the USB drive with the Linux Mint installed on it. When I first started up Linux Mint on that flash drive, everything worked fine. I installed a couple of apps using the App Store, and I set the time zone to US Eastern, where I live. After I shut down Linux Mint and later restarted it from that flash drive, all those changes were forgotten. And boy, I was really unhappy that it forgot the time zone. I confirmed by experiment that the persistence partition size greater than 0 enables changes, like the ones I made, to be remembered on the external USB drive. So always set a value greater than 0. Learn from my mistake. In the Rufus format options, which I've circled the file system field, and it has a drop-down menu. And I strongly suggest that you choose NTFS in the drop-down menu. That is a very ruggedized file system. When you choose it, the drop-down menu closes, and the choice is filled in the file system field. Now, that's the last step that you absolutely have to take. So at this point, you tap the Start button. Now, because the ISO file is large, it's going to take some time for Rufus to install it on the flash drive. Several minutes. If it's a flash drive, it may take a much shorter time. If it's a USB hard drive or a USB solid state drive, it'll be the fastest on the USB solid state drive. So the step 5 is to click the Start button and get coffee, check email, do what you want. Eventually, Rufus will tell you it's done. Now we're going to get to the part that is going to almost certainly require some creative thought on your part, and that is prepare your BIOS or UEFI to start an operating system on an external USB drive. I'm going to show you how to do that for each of the 2 Windows 10 boxes that I have. In each case, there's 2 basic steps. One is to access the user interface for your BIOS, which is an acronym for Basic Input-Output System. And in some recent machines, like my HP laptop, it's now instead sometimes called UEFI. That's an acronym for Uniform Extensible Firmware Interface. They mean the same thing. Don't worry about that. When you get to that BIOS or UEFI interface, you need to set what's called the boot order. And that order establishes how the BIOS or UEFI looks for a bootable operating system. What we're going to do is move external USB drive to the top of that order. So it tries that first. If it's not found, it'll boot from the hard drive or the solid state drive, just like it always does. But if it finds the USB drive, it'll use that first to start up Linux. And in case you didn't get it from the context, boot means starting up an operating system. So just on this slide alone, you have learned 3 different words that you can use to impress your friends and colleagues. UEFI, BIOS, and boot order. All right. Now, I'm going to show you the Windows way, which I consider to be more reliable than using a function key or a combo of function keys and, say, Control or Alt to get to the BIOS or UEFI user interface. For starters, you have to shut down all applications. They will not survive this process. So shut down all applications. Open the Settings app on your Windows 10 computer. Click Update and Security in Settings. It'll lead you to this page known as Update and Security. And in that, in the left pane down below Update and Security, there's a choice called Recovery. Click that. When you click that, you're going to see this information that I have shown you on the right side pane of the screen. And what you're looking for, I have red circled there in the right pane. It's called Advanced Startup. And that is what you need. And you see the button called Restart Now that's contained in that red circle. That's what you tap. And this is the beginning of your trip into the user interface for your BIOS or UEFI. When you do that, the Choose an Option menu appears like you see here. Your mouse is not active at this point. The only way you can move between these choices is with up, down, left, and right arrow keys. And you choose one by selecting it and then tapping the Enter key on your keyboard. Tap the down arrow key to move to Troubleshoot. I circled that for you, and then tap the Enter key. That makes this second menu appear. It's called Troubleshoot. What a surprise. And there are 2 choices here. So you use the down arrow key to move to Advanced Options, which I've circled for you, and then tap the Enter key. Then you see this menu called Advanced Options. And it's got 6 choices. Once again, the mouse is not active, so you use the left and right up and down arrows. Move to UEFI firmware setup, or it may say BIOS setup. And it may have the word settings in it, like I've circled for you. Tap the Enter key. And that's the end of the standardized access step. You may be prompted to restart the computer also. But from that point on, what you're going to see varies with the make and model of your computer. And as it turns out, that the part from this point on is not standardized, and we'll talk about why it isn't. All right, so here is the screens for the boot order controls in my HP laptop. It displays this menu next. It's called the startup menu, and in this you choose F10 or whatever key is labeled BIOS setup. You tap that key. And this menu bar appears across the top of a screen that's all text. Usually on the far left in the blue, the word main will have the black around it initially. That's the default choice. What you need to do is move by using right arrows, because in HP, this also does not use the mouse. You move from that to boot options, which I've circled for you here. Once it's highlighted in black, the contents of the screen below it will change. and you're going to use two of the various choices in the screen below it to adjust the boot order. Now you can see the screen below boot options. And the first thing we have to do is circled at the top is USB boot, which is disabled. So we want to enable it. Tap the down arrow key to move to that field, USB boot. And as I said, initially it's disabled by default. Tap the enter key once you have that word highlighted, and you'll see a menu pop up with two choices, disabled and enabled, like I've depicted here. In the menu, tap the down arrow key to highlight enabled and tap the enter key. That menu closes and the word disabled in that line, USB boot, is replaced by the word enabled. So that's the first part. Now, the second part is further down and to the left. You tap the down arrow key to move to the first item below this phrase, UEFI boot order that you see here. Excuse me. The first choice is OS Boot Manager. That is on your hard drive or your solid state drive and will start Windows. Now, what we want to do is move USB flash drive above OS Boot Manager. Tap the down arrow key to highlight that one. There will be instructions in the screen that tell you to tap the F6 key to move that option up. Tap it once, it'll move above OS Boot Manager. Oops, wrong way. There we go. Now, the final thing you have to do is move in the top row from boot options to exit. And the default option when you get to exit is displayed here in black, save changes and exit. Tap the enter key to select the highlighted top choice, which is save changes and exit. You will see a menu that asks, do you really want to do that? Yes or no? And yes is the default choice. So again, all you have to do is tap the enter key to select yes. Without doing this step, save changes and exit, any changes that you made in this screen will not be saved. So this is by definition the last step. Okay, the menu closes, the BIOS UI closes, the computer restarts, and Windows, assuming your Linux USB drive is not plugged in, Windows eventually appears. Now, Toshiba, as we are going to see, looks very different. But the key word to look for in all of these BIOS or UEFI user interfaces is boot order. So here's the BIOS for Toshiba, and as it turns out, in my Toshiba laptop, the mouse is active. So that's one thing that is not a constant in this experience. Some of them use the mouse, some of them don't. The menu headings are in the left pane, which is I've portrayed here. And what you want to do is click Advanced. Now, in the right pane, when you select Advanced, you'll see several choices. The one you want to choose is Change Boot Order. There's the magic words, boot order. When you select that, a pop-up dialog box appears. This is the dialog box. And you can see, once again, the hard drive or the solid state drive is at the top. So our job is to move the USB choice to the top, above HDD/SSD. Click USB and then click the up button, which I circled for you here. USB will move up above HDD/SDD, which is what you want. Then click at the bottom of this window, click the OK button, and this dialog box closes. Once you do that, in the left pane, click Exit. I circled that for you. I didn't portray it here in the screen captures, but in the right pane, you'll see a choice called Exit Saving Changes. Again, very important. You need to select that. If you don't save your changes, they don't take effect. And finally, there is another choice, appears a yes/no box for exit saving changes. You select yes in that box. The pop-up disappears, the BIOS UEFI disappears, and eventually Windows restarts. So why are these two examples so significantly different? Well, it's competition, folks. The bottom line is many companies publish BIOS, all have the same BIOS computer interfaces. Those allow the operating system to use the hard drive, the solid state drive, USB devices, mouse, touchpad, printers, keyboards, and so forth. That's the primary purpose of the BIOS. Competition keeps the price of the BIOS low. Competition encourages the vendors of BIOS to introduce variances that might make them more desirable than their competition. I didn't capture it, but I am using my Windows 11 desktop tower today, which was I purchased it new about 2 years ago. And the BIOS in that looks like a pinball machine screen, all flashing lights and fancy fonts. So I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be as simple as what I showed you today. It depends on your BIOS, or UEFI, if they call it that. But the thing to keep in mind is that you're going to look for the phrase boot order. All right. Emphasizing it once again, look for boot order. Now, this will work in older Windows, and it'll also work in Windows 11. So I'm emphasizing Windows 10 because so many people have some decisions to face on Windows 10. For other brands, and Toshiba is no longer sold in the US, but for other brands, to change the boot order might be a challenge. There are some helpful options that you can look into. There may be YouTube videos specific to your Windows 10 computer make and model to demonstrate exactly how to change the boot order. Your computer brand may have posted on their website instructions for changing the boot order. And then, since I know all of you belong to a user group, you could ask your user group. So those are 3 possibilities if you need help. All right, now we're going to look at, we've prepared the computer, we have prepared the USB drive with Linux on it. Let's find out how to start it. Shut down the computer, attach your external USB drive on which you installed Linux to a USB socket on your computer while it is shut down. I recommend that you use a USB 3 compatible external drive and a USB 3 port on the Windows 10 computer. Even my 10-year-old laptop had multiple USB 3 compatible ports. Those work much faster than USB 2 ports, and that means it'll take less time to get Linux up and running. I like the recent Micro Center USB 3 flash drives because they contain an LED that blinks to confirm that the computer is using that drive. Now, I found that, how do I put it, warm and fuzzy. After a few seconds of no power, start the computer. Now, the first thing that appears is what's called the grub loader. That word grub is an acronym, just like GNU, GNU is an acronym. But in this case, grub means the Grand Unified Boot Loader. And this is what it looked like on my Toshiba laptop. The very first choice in it says Start Linux 22.1 Cinnamon 64-bit. And all you have to do is tap the enter key because that's what you want to do. That menu closes, and soon this logo for Linux Mint appears on the screen. It may appear twice. On my HP laptop, it appears very large initially, and then a smaller version appears because it's using a higher graphics screen resolution. And after a while, the Cinnamon desktop appears. That's what you're going to see next. And here it is. Now, I have to admit, I didn't think this was the best possible desktop because it looks pretty grim, but you can modify it. This is what you'll see the first time. And this is what I saw after I installed one of my photos as the screen backdrop. You're also seeing several icons down in the bottom. And just like Windows, those indicate things that you can run. There's some things on the right, such as the time of day. You can see the default format displayed in the far right corner of that black bar. In the far left corner, you can see the Linux Mint logo. As I mentioned earlier, that logo, if you click on it, brings up the main menu for Linux Mint. You can also click on the Windows key on your keyboard to bring up the main menu. Here's a closer look at the taskbar, and you can see some icons that may look familiar. The menu button I mentioned on the left, but also Firefox is here. Audacity is here. That's the one with the headphones. The VLC media player is here. That's the one with the traffic cone. And Zoom. Zoom I had to install on my own. The blank icon to the right opens LibreOffice and its suite of applications. And there's one more that is going to be very important. It has 9 dots in it. I've circled it for you. It's the Linux Mint Application Manager, which is an app store. And I have found that app store to be very useful. Here's a picture of the main menu. There are 3 vertical columns in the main menu. In the left column, which I've circled, frequently used apps, including at the bottom, the red shutdown button. But also you can see the application manager is included there too. In the middle column, there are group names. There's a group called accessories. There's a group called Office, which is where all the LibreOffice applications are stored in the menu system. And there's an internet choice, which includes Firefox, Zoom, and Thunderbird. If you click a group name, then the apps in that group appear in the right-hand column. I think I clicked accessories here. I'm not absolutely sure, but in any event, that's how the menu system works. And it turns out the middle column and the right-hand column can easily grow to be far too large. So there are scroll bars on the right-hand side of each of those columns. Also, you can pin app icons to the desktop, just like you can pin Windows files and Windows applications as icons on the Windows desktop. I pinned the top icon here by accident. That was for a flash drive. The next one is pinned by the operating system itself. And I want to caution you because it does what it says it does. It installs Linux Mint on your hard drive or your solid state drive, the one inside your computer. You really don't want to tap that one unless you're absolutely sure that you want to install Linux Mint. So I advise you to stay away from that icon or even delete it. But it is there in the case that you ultimately decide that you're going to switch to the Linux operating system. You can pin an application icon to the taskbar. You first, from the main menu, you launch the app. Then the app icon appears in the taskbar, and then you right-click that app icon, and this menu appears. Now, it may be a year from now when they release maybe another point version of the operating system. This menu will look slightly different, but you're definitely going to see one choice that you need. It's called Pin to Panel. Choose that choice. The menu closes, and that pins your application to the taskbar. Now I want to look at what I consider to be probably, in terms of managing your files, the most important application. It's called the Files app. And in the left pane are a list of major devices and folders. You can click any one of those and see what's inside in the right-hand pane. So here, our current choice is Home, and we've got some familiar sounding folders: Documents, Downloads, Desktop, Music, Pictures, Videos, and even some that aren't so familiar, like Recent Files. There's also something in the left pane that's extremely useful if what you're doing with Linux Mint is recovering files from your drive C. So let's get to that. As I said, the Files app is the functional equivalent of Windows File Explorer. The File app allows you to connect to a network-attached storage drive, which I use a lot. It also enables you to access the hard drive or SSD on which Windows is installed, including the folders for your documents, photos, videos, music, whatever. If you need to recover those files, the File app does allow you to find them, browse through them, copy them, and paste them. You probably want to paste them to an external flash drive. Also, if there's a file on your Windows hard drive or elsewhere in the folder tree for Linux, you can bookmark that. And I've bookmarked several major folders in my NAS so that I can get to those very quickly. How do you identify your Windows Drive C? Well, it turns out in that left pane, you're going to see Windows Drive C is identified by its volume name. You will not see the letter drive. You will not see C or Drive C. In this case, on my HP laptop, the volume name for Drive C is identified as Windows. And that blue bar that you see shows you how full the drive is. It's more than half full in this case. You can click the drive and see its folder tree in the right-hand pane. So you can browse down through to users, your username, and ultimately my documents and whatever else is under your username. And then you can make copies. So to be very specific, here I have selected the Windows drive, and it had several folders in it at the top level. Select users to find your files, and then open the account name that belongs to you. And under that folder, you will see things like documents, music, videos, and so forth. And as I suggested before, I recommend that you connect a second USB storage device and paste file you copy from your Windows drive into that separate USB drive. All right. Now, Windows key combinations. I mentioned these before. The Files app within Linux Mint with the Cinnamon desktop does recognize the Control X, Control C, and Control V. Many other Linux apps do enable familiar Windows key combinations. LibreOffice to edit writer documents, you can, or present or slide decks. Those key combinations work fine for text, images, and entire slides in a presentation. While using the Firefox web browser to access webmail, those key combos work fine to copy pictures or copy text. There is a great application for manipulating images called the GNU Image Manipulation Program, also called GIMP. That's its acronym. And that is actually available for Windows as well. But that program, I have been very impressed with it. It implements something like 70 to 80% of what Adobe Photoshop implements. And so you can use the GIMP program to edit images, select the part that you want to include in a document or presentation, and then copy that to that document or presentation and paste it there. And incidentally, although I did the screen captures from my Windows computers, this entire presentation was prepared using Linux Mint and LibreOffice Impress. Now we're going to talk about some things that I thought were less than perfect about Linux Mint. The first one is easily predictable. An external drive is slower than an internal drive. Virtual memory operations are very slow and can slow you down as a result. Virtual memory means intelligent management of RAM so that you think you're running many more applications than you really are. But those have to be stored someplace when you haven't used them recently, and they're stored on the flash drive in the case of a test drive of Linux Mint. If you install a big app, like a video editor, that takes a long time because it has to be written to the flash drive. And it may also introduce long delays for other apps to react to your clicks. The shutdown is not perfect. It turns out when you're doing a test drive, power does not actually shut down. Linux Mint shuts down, but the power light, the button with the power light was still lit up indefinitely. So I held down the power button to force power shutdown. Just something you need to be aware of. These problems do not exist if and when you install Linux on an internal drive. There are some other things you may want to know, though. It took a while, but I did find a way to connect my Google Drives to the Files app. Also, by default, the Files app can connect to OneDrive. If you have that a Microsoft account that gives you that cloud storage, you can access it directly from the Files app as long as you tell the Files app your user ID and password for connection to your Microsoft account. Zoom on Linux is not so easy to update as it is on Windows. Zoom for Linux does not download the updated installation file by itself. Zoom for Windows does that, but there's an easy workaround. It will open the zoom.com page from which Zoom can be downloaded for Linux Mint and other Linux distros. It will give you a drop-down menu to select which Linux distro you use. And once you do that, then it will download the installation file into the downloads folder of Linux Mint for your account. Now, if it's already installed, it turns out that the Linux installer app installs only the updated portion from the newly downloaded Zoom installation file. And that means that most updates are installed very quickly for Zoom. I did also try test driving Ubuntu Linux. I used Rufus to install Ubuntu Linux on 2 flash drives. Now, they have their own desktop called Plasma, and that was the first thing that I tried. It worked for a while. I found one aspect of it was very nice. It had a nice screen capture capability that only took one key combination to store the current screen on disk. It takes 2 keys in Linux Mint with the Cinnamon desktop. Now, for reasons I did not understand, later that same flash drive with Plasma installed refused to start up. I did also pull another variant and downloaded it in an ISO file. That was Ubuntu with the Cinnamon desktop. And when I installed that using Rufus on a flash drive, it never was able to start up, not at all. I don't know what was going on here. I've heard other people say they had no trouble, but in any event, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Most Linux distro brands will give you free updates of the Linux operating system for 3 or more years. I originally, on my flash drive, I had Linux Mint 22.1. After I installed it on my Toshiba computer, it later downloaded 22.2 and installed that. And that was for free and no glitches that I could identify. It's possible that you may need to create a free account with the brand in order to get those updates to be auto-installed. If they do have some fixed duration of free updates, often the brand will have a new major release of the Linux operating system that can be downloaded and installed at zero cost. So the limited duration really doesn't amount to much of a limit. Now, after test driving Linux Mint, starting about a year ago, I tested it for 5 weeks. And my Toshiba laptop SATA hard drive had a lot of bad sectors on it. So what I did was remove that SATA hard drive from that laptop, and I installed a much faster $60 480 gigabyte SATA solid state drive, SSD. Now that achieved a couple of things. One is I preserved Windows 10 on the removed hard drive. It's sitting here on my desk. And so that if there's some reason why I absolutely have to have it back, I can get it. I can put it back. Also, if I only need it to copy certain things off of it, I can put it in a SATA USB dock and connect that to my Linux computer and use the Files app to find things on that hard drive. I did use the Linux Mint flash drive with that install icon to install Linux Mint on the new internal SATA solid state drive in the Toshiba laptop. And I got to say it runs faster than Windows, significantly faster. There's good technical reasons for that. I won't go into it right now, but I was very impressed. There are some things you need to know if you are really focused on a Windows-like experience. First of all, drive letters do not exist. Volume names are shown by the Files app. As I pointed out, drive C was named Windows. Printers, very interesting. Discovered, and a universal driver is configured automatically every time Linux starts up. No other drivers are needed. I do not know why it doesn't remember that driver the next time it starts up, but that is just the way it plays right now. Zoom and some other popular apps are not included in the software manager application that I mentioned that works as an app store. So for that, I downloaded that from the Zoom website. I also did that for the Audacity music editor application. Adobe apps are not available. So if you are very used to using Photoshop, I still have a Windows 10 computer with Photoshop on it, but Linux Mint does include a good PDF reader, and the GIMP application does appear to have most of the functionality of Adobe Photoshop. Okay, about done. We're going to talk about how to download these things I've mentioned to you. Rufus for Windows is a portable exe file. It requires no installation. You put it on your hard drive, double click it, it runs. Here is the URL. And here is a QR code containing the URL. It's also available from the Windows Store, but that is not always the latest version of Rufus. So you may prefer to download it directly from its website. Linux Mint 22.2 is the current version. I don't know exactly how much bigger it is than the 2.8 gigabyte ISO file that I downloaded with 22.1, but in any event, it will take some time to download. Here is the URL. There's a QR code that contains the URL. Scroll down that web page and select what's called a US mirror site. What does that mean? It means it's not the primary place where they place their downloads, but they have several mirror sites in the US that, for purposes of downloading in the US, work faster than their original site. So it's to your advantage to use a US mirror site. There are other Linux distros that offer Windows-like GUIs. This one has skirted the edge of legal trouble for quite some time. It's now called Winix. It was formerly called Ubuntu. It closely mimics Windows 11. It's also often criticized for its intellectual property violations, which means it uses a lot of the same background images that are used by Windows 11. So, among other things. But I've given you the website for it, so you can try it out if you wish. There's another one I couldn't find much information on about it. It's called Zorin Linux. Here is the website for downloading that Linux also. Just to reemphasize this, none of these run applications that are built specifically for the Windows operating system. In some cases, you're lucky because they've built them for various versions of Linux. LibreOffice did that, for instance. I've used it on Windows for more than 10 years, and it works just fine on Linux. There are a couple of ways that you can run some Windows applications in Linux. One of them is called Wine, and there's a virtual machine capability also that'll run it within Linux. It's also possible to install Linux and Windows on the same hard drive so that they coexist with each other. I have not done that. I may do that on my HP laptop. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to mention something that John Kennedy has been doing for quite some time. The third Wednesday workshop is usually devoted to some Linux topics. And they're usually of very broad interest and not especially technical. John is the same John Kennedy who is hosting today's Wednesday workshop and whose voice is shot due to recent medical difficulties. He uses Linux Mint on computers at his home. And just in case you are not already subscribed to receive invitations by email to the Wednesday workshops, here's the URL for establishing your subscription. And that's the slide that everybody wants to see, the end. Okay, so let's stop the share and tackle some questions.
Okay. Would using Linux from USB when on the internet and using Windows 10 normal boot be a workable option?
Please repeat the question.
Okay. All right. Would using Linux from USB when on the internet and using Windows 10 normal boot be a workable option?
Yes.
Thank you. Have a scanner that does not have drivers for Windows 11, would like to keep Windows 10 for that reason. Is that viable?
Yes, I think so. Oddly enough, I have my scanner sitting in my bedroom ready to test with Linux Mint 22.2. I have not done it yet, so I can't tell you all about it. I do have those applications that were provided with the scanner for Windows installed both in my Windows 11 tower and my HP laptop. So at some point, I'm going to try it. but I think either a dual boot situation or a test drive Linux situation is ideal when you have things that you can only accomplish with Windows.
Okay.
I'd like to just jump in and say that I have a very old Canon flat scanner. It still works with my Mint, and I have a newer all-in-one Brother, but I had to go to the website and download the scanner drivers to make it work really good.
So those were Linux Mint drivers, John?
They were Linux Mint for the Brother, yeah.
For the Brother scanner.
The other one just seems to work.
Got it. It turns out what I have is a high-end Canon flatbed scanner, and I love its resolution. Its max resolution is 9600 dots per inch, which for scanning my Ektachrome slides is terrific. Now you've made me want to go upstairs and try it today.
Yeah, mine. The name will sound old. Is a Canon. I can't.
It's probably CanoScan.
Yes, old.
Well, mine is old too. It's no longer manufactured, but it's I think the model number is 9900F, but I'm not absolutely sure.
Would a scammer be able to infect the Windows 10 operating system on the computer when running Linux from the bootable USB?
I think not.
Okay.
To be blunt, I've never heard of a virus coming in through a scanner. That doesn't mean it's never happened. I've just not heard of it.
Okay. Do you still have to log in with Microsoft account to subscribe to ESU?
I believe so, yes. But that's a little bit far afield from today's topic. I admit I brought it up, but
my HP computer has 2 physical hard drives, a bootable drive C with Windows installed, and a larger data drive D. Does booting using Linux USB allow access to both C and D drives?
that's a good question. I haven't tried it, but I believe that the answer is yes.
Okay.
I'll concur.
Thank you.
Two votes.
Okay, but well, then those are the important ones right now, so it doesn't make any difference. There's only 2 out of 80. And you guys that still use Adobe PDF Reader, it is not necessary in any way, shape, or form. There are a ton and a half PDF readers out there that are just as good. So don't think you are still hung up with using Adobe's. And I know on many websites, it'll say you want to read our newsletter, get the Adobe PDF Reader. I have not used it for 1,000 years. I came back from the Southwest Tech Conference one summer, and I had an email from Adobe and said, oh my goodness, we've been hacked, and these are the updates and blah, blah, blah. They'd been hacked in the spring. This was late summer. And I thought, really? So I did what they said. A couple of weeks later, it happened to them again. And I thought, I have to worry enough about Microsoft. So I exited ever using Adobe PDF Reader again.
Judy, I'll tell you, that delay between the occurrence and the discovery and investigation by the affected outfit happens all the time.
I know.
I got a letter this week from an organization I never heard of, which was a subcontractor of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. They had an incursion in January that they did not find out about until March. And then it took many weeks to determine who was affected, who in their database needed to receive notification. And I was one of them. But that letter was dated in late October, They sent it out by first class pre-sort. It showed up here on December 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. Postal Service was partly to blame for that, I believe.
Murray, you are on with your question. Hello. We're looking up your nose.
I had to turn
That's the
on.
top of his head. I'm sorry.
Now he turned himself off again.
No, press the space bar or do whatever you have to do to re-enable it.
Yeah, if nothing else, you guys, John has to go for PT soon. So, tap, click on the monitor with your mouse.
Murray, it can't. You were there. You're on now. Then it went off again. It just.
Murray, click on your monitor, please, and press your space bar and talk. There you go. Talk.
Nope, not going to work.
Was he the guy with the iPad?
No.
No.
Okay.
Anyway, Randy, your turn.
Yeah, very good presentation. I use Linux all the time and have been for years. Something that I think everybody should know, and that is you don't need a PDF reader, no matter what operating system you are in, because the browser will read your PDFs automatically. Doesn't matter whether it's Firefox or Chrome or Edge or whatever. It reads it. That's it.
Yep.
That's true, but I create PDFs fairly often. And what I want to do is make sure that various readers read it with accuracy. So that's why I have Adobe
Yeah, you know you can
reader.
create those. You can create those PDFs through your LibreOffice Word.
Indeed, that's what I do.
Okay.
And my point is not how to create them, but making sure that they can be read by a variety of readers.
Mm-hmm.
And just for, a warm, fuzzy feeling, I test them in the browser, in Adobe, and in the reader on my Linux Mint computer.
Mm-hmm. Murray, are you ready? Murray, there's something wrong with your speakers because we see your mouth moving, but we hear nothing and you're unmuted.
Okay, try that. Does that work?
Yes.
That works.
Okay, I had to unplug my headset.
Remember, you've had to do that before.
Oh.
Talk.
It's gone again.
Have I got my audio now?
Yes. Keep talking. Don't move, except your mouth.
Okay. So, if you can't find any drivers or whatever for an old scanner, there is a really terrific application, and it will at least run under. It runs under Linux too. It's called ViewScan, and they have drivers for almost every printer scanner that was ever made. So that's an alternative if you have trouble that you can try looking into. The second thing I want to mention is that I have a 2017 27-inch Retina iMac, which is absolutely a gorgeous computer. And I've installed Linux Cinnamon Mint on it. And because it could no longer be updated, I just wiped out the Mac OS and installed it on their native. It's only got a rotating hard drive, but it actually works better under Linux Mint for most things than it ever did as a Macintosh computer. And it is a really beautiful computer. The only thing that I could not solve was getting the internal microphone to work. I never solved that. My workaround has been to use a headset. It has to be connected by USB, not the audio jack, and that has solved it. A webcam with a microphone will also work connected to USB, but it is a really nice computer, and with Linux Mint, it really works very, very well.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Cool. John Metcalf.
And I'm going to ask you by email later how you did the got the Google Drive showing up in your files. But I'll save that for an email.
I've got an article drafted on that already. It's very interesting. It involves two GNOME applications, one of which was already installed on my Linux Mint, but not both. So I had to install a second one. And once I did that, I think I have 10 Google accounts. And so far I've gotten 5 of them attached to the Files app so that I can access those drives directly using the Files app.
Okay.
And just by the way,
more detail on that.
Just by the way, when you use the Google Drive application on Windows or on Macintosh, the limit is 4. So I feel like Linux has an advantage.
Huh.
Of course, I'm an addict to Google Drives. What can I say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I never tried doing it for different ones. I'm going to have to do that. I never even thought you could.
Very good. Okay. Thanks, Murray. Oh, and John Metcalf, your turn.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just one quick thing on creating PDFs. If I create a document in Word, Excel, just about anything, I can print it to PDF. Microsoft has a print to PDF.
Yes, that's true. It has limitations, and that is why other methods are more useful.
Yeah, for general purpose. Yeah, I do have the Cofex Power PDF program that works just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Let me mention. Okay, my son downloaded a large composite image from one of the rovers on Mars that was made available by NASA, 1 billion pixels. And he told his computer to print it. Most people don't know this, but one of the critical jobs in a printer driver is to reduce the file to the resolution of the printer. And as a result, after 30 minutes of waiting for the thing to start printing, he came to me and said, "Dad, why is this taking so long?" And I explained it to him. And I eventually did a presentation at my user group on how you can get your photos to print quickly. And the answer is to reduce their resolution to the resolution of the printer. My printer is an old one. It happens to be 600 dots per inch. And one of the things I do when I have a document that includes images is to make sure that those images are go into PDF form at 600 dots per inch. LibreOffice will allow you to do that. I don't think the Microsoft printer driver for creating PDFs will allow you to do that.
But it's a question someone can ask Google if they would like to know. Or DuckDuckGo. John still might be here.
No, he left.
John K.E. Andy Kerrigan, unmute. Thank you.
John, as always, really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
Just throwing in 2 cents because you had 2 of the topics that have come up in our group, PDFs and scanning. And one of the things that I've been using for years, I went to it because it's cross-platform, is called NAPS, N-A-P-S with the number 2, NAPS 2. Beauty, I was going to put the link in the chat box, but it's disabled. I started using it way back when because it was a portable app on Windows. But when I started playing around with Linux, found out that it was on Linux. That was great. Installed it. Then the topic of people playing around with Linux and not having the drivers available for their particular scanner came up, and I turned a couple of people onto it. I have no idea. I have one of these office devices with, print, scan, make coffee, by the way. So I'm not hot and heavy into it, but it scans to PDF, and it supports a whole bunch of other scanners. I don't know how many. We haven't come across any that weren't supported. The other thing is, John, I believe it's in the Linux Mint software manager. So you can go to the website and download it from there, but it's also part of the web store.
Different things get into software manager in different ways. I have found some that were ported from installation file for a different version of a different distro of Linux, and those seem to be older versions because it takes time to do the conversion. And whoever did it once because he had a friend who needed it, and then never bothered to do it again. So you check the website and you find out the thing that's in the application manager is a year and a half old, and the website has the current version.
Well, specifically with Linux Mint, the reason that it's probably not the most current version, or it may not be the most current version, is because once it makes it into their repository, the Linux Mint repository, they're basically guaranteeing that it's going to run on Linux Mint.
Yeah.
And they haven't had time to test the latest and the greatest. So
well,
that's what I said. There is a website and it is in the software manager.
The point I want to make is that even some things that do show up in the application manager are not the latest versions for the reason you point out, but there are other reasons as well, because they are provided by individuals that converted from another distro. And what I found was they had, I think, a year-old version of Audacity in the App Store, and I went to Audacity's website and downloaded the latest one. It works fine.
Yep. Again, thank you.
Andy? And Andy, send me an email with the name and all that good kind of stuff. Thanks. Joel, your turn.
Okay. Just one comment on the scanners. You may have drivers that would drive the scanner, but you may not be able to see all the features. And the other thing is, if you've got a scanner which came with some really nice software, that software is probably Windows only and probably also will not run under Linux. So for that reason, I actually run Windows under virtual machines on my Linux so I can have them running at the same time as my Linux system and scan things and get the nice post-processing of the images and the ability to handle negatives and color negatives and all that kind of stuff, and get them quickly back to the other system, which is also running at the same time. You can share file systems between the two systems in ways that allows both of them to see it, and that way you get all the software features that came with your scanner as well.
Joel, I'll tell you, I accomplished that using my NAS, because all of my computers, my Raspberry Pi 5, my Mac Mini, Windows 11, Windows 10, and my Linux Mint, they all talk to my NAS. So whenever I do a scan, as you say, using my Windows computer, I park it on the NAS, and then I can use it anywhere.
Right. But that would be an argument against trying to use a dual boot on the same machine, or to have a USB version for one thing and the Windows system for the other. You do need to have separate machines or a virtual machine in order to make it convenient to do. I was interested in your description about the printer drivers being dynamically loaded. That's actually a Linux Mint, maybe a Ubuntu feature, because Fedora doesn't do that. It does a permanent install of the drivers.
I haven't investigated it very much, but I am not surprised to learn what you say. It turns out that there is a complex, how do I describe it? Complex genetic tree. Linux Mint was derived from Ubuntu. Other distros are like some of those that I mentioned. The Linux is derived from Ubuntu. The Raspberry Pi 5 operating system called Raspbian is derived from Debian. And it's pretty obvious to me that Ubuntu must have been derived from Debian because there are things that I have installed that are specifically Ubuntu stuff, and other things I've installed that are specifically Debian stuff. They all work fine on Linux Mint.
Interesting. Do we have any more questions? This is your last chance. Going, gone. Hey, John, thank you very much. Looking forward to a Raspberry Pi presentation. I'm fascinated by Raspberry Pis. I
do have a draft. I do have a draft.
I'm psychic.
And there's something else you asked me about I have in draft also. I can't offhand remember what it was.
And also GIMP. People need to know how to use GIMP.
Actually, there's another guy in my user group that did a presentation on Windows GIMP several years ago. I may talk to him.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you all for sticking with me. I am under the weather, and I may end up on antibiotics to get rid of whatever this is because it's hit me now for 13 days.
Ooh.
And it's just congestion, but you know, it has all sorts of disadvantages. Like my daughter wants me to walk around with the N95 mask on all the time, and it's uncomfortable. But my heart goes out to John Kennedy because I know that if I ever sound like he did today, it's because I'm on death's door. And that was when I was working, that was a real disadvantage because I'd call my boss. I would say, I can't come in today. I've got a tremendous cold. And you could hear the contempt and doubt in his voice because my voice sounded normal.
Yeah, it does. And John had to walk downstairs. He walks down backwards to get down to the basement, theoretically, where his computers are. He might, but Betty took the APCUG laptop upstairs, so I don't think he's to that part yet. But the fact that he had just had knee surgery and then he had to have gallbladder surgery.
Yeah, that's a 1-2 punch, boy.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate it. And we have a couple of more Wednesday workshops, and we start out 2026 with Cynthia Mackley, who has a column that you can subscribe to with tips and stuff. And she's going to be talking about using your phone for everything, whether you have an iPhone or an Android phone. So that should be interesting. And that will be the second Wednesday in January 2026. Don't forget, your group's dues are due. And I'll be sending out a reminder in 5 days. I love it. On January 6th, I got an email from some treasurer, and she said, "Have you sent out the reminder yet?" And I thought, no, you should just have paid attention to the first one I sent out. Our PayPal account is down. PayPal does not like that we do not have a street address. We're only post office box. But Ray has a letter from 2019 from the Bank of America that apparently says they really are legitimate because that's the bank that has all our money. And so he's working on getting it back up. And please, when you send your dues in, do not forget to complete the short form. It's critical. They come to Ray and it'll have John Krout on it. He doesn't know what group John's with. I mean, he does really, but that's just my example. And he has absolutely no who the dues belong to. So thank you very much for reading the instructions and paying attention.
Incidentally, this is a little wind-up penguin.
You really have gone over, haven't you?
No, this was there's a famous tech columnist who comes to speak at our user group once a year, and his wife forces him to clean out everything he's picked up at CES and the other places that he speaks. So he gives them away, and I picked up this little penguin.
Yeah. When I used to come home from Comdex, I had a mini motorhome, and my double bed would be completely covered with stuff, whether it was software for the raffle or tchotchkes just to give out at the meeting. And it was just so much fun. That really doesn't, and when it got to CBS and all the refrigerators and junk like that, that kind of went away. Sandy, you have the last comment or question.
Those dues, are they paid by the computer group or are they from us individually?
Computer group pays $50.
Okay, just checking.
Yep. Okay, goodbye, you guys.
Goodbye.
Bye. This is from
Bye-bye.
John. Judy, don't forget to download the chat. Okay, John, I will.
Have a good breakfast, Judy.
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Sorry, steal your thunder.
I'm going to call you right after the meeting.
Okay. I am saying again, bye.